Hey, it's Benji Cole, son of Al Cole from CBS Radio and host of People of Distinction, the talk that gives an in-depth view of some of the most dynamic, intelligent, and successful people on the planet. Run to our website, peopleofdistinction.org for more info, or you can always email me directly at benji@alcoleenterprises.com. And on the line with us today, we have Gerald L. Nardella. And we're going to be discussing his amazing novel, Playing Hurt. Now, it's available for purchase through Amazon as well as barnesandnoble.com. And before we go any further, I do want to take this opportunity and point out that Jerry was brought to our network by one of the best advertisers in the business. And of course, I'm talking about Author Reputation Press. So listen, if you're a writer out there and you have a book that you need help moving, I'm going to give you some fantastic advice right now. Contact ARP. I'm telling you, people, they're one of the best in the business to do it, and this is what they specialize in. They'll take your literary creation to the next level. So in order to gather more information, head on over to authorreputationpress.com today and gather all the ways that they can help you. And listen, it is a true pleasure, an absolute delight to have Jerry here on the line. Jerry, first and foremost, man, welcome to People of Distinction, and thank you very much for being a guest. How you doing today, sir?
Well, thank you, Mr. Cole. Thanks for having me.
Jerry, this is a true pleasure and an absolute delight. I think what you're doing here is special, and just for entertainment purposes, I think your book has so much to offer. But for those of my listening audience members that really want to search for those underlying messages and that underlying theme, this is going to be a valuable lesson that we're going to be able to learn and implement into our lives. So thank you for writing the book, and thank you for being a guest with us here to discuss it. Now, before we go into the book itself and start to explore some of those themes, tell us a little bit more about your background, please.
Well, I was born and raised in a small Montana railroad town, and there was very little opportunity there, and there's few role models that I put my hands on. Mm-hmm. And I was from a broken home, and I understood what the experiences were with financial hardships and emotional and insecurities, and so I have a little background in what the two protagonists in this story go through, and so I try to relate that those feelings through these two protagonists. And so that was my beginnings, and of course I went on. I played sports in high school. I went on, joined the U.S. Army. From there, I went on to college at Montana State University, and I became a CPA, and that's what I do today. Is I'm a certified public accountant in Billings, Montana. I'm married. I married my high school sweetheart. We have 2 children, and now we have 6 grandchildren, and I think there's almost 6 great-grandchildren. And so that's where I am today.
There you have it. Jerry, thank you very much for articulating that, and so much to unpack there. First and foremost, thank you very much for your service and helping protect our liberties here in the States. Secondly, what a beautiful family. It sounds like you've surrounded yourself with fantastic, nothing but continued success to you and all of your loved ones around. And then, I wasn't planning on going here initially, Jerry, but after that explanation, how could I go anywhere else? I got to talk to you about inspiration here, man. Your background is in accounting, right? So we connect the dots for me, build that bridge when it comes to writing, Jerry. Where does that love for creative writing come from?
Well, it's true. I mean, we have 2 sides of our brain, right side, left side, you know, and my accounting side is the structural portion of it, and it gets in the way of my creativity on the other side, and I have to balance that. I mean, then all writers go through this. One side of your brain is telling you, "No, that sounds terrible. Shouldn't be writing that." Whereas the creativity side is trying to let these emotions and things out that you normally wouldn't talk about. So that is a struggle, and as an accountant, like I say, I have a structural side of my brain that I have to follow, But I get through it, and I enjoy both counting and writing. So
there you have it. There you have it. Well, Jerry, without further ado, of course, today's anchor is all about your book, Playing Hurt. Tell us a little bit more about your novel.
My novel is a love story. It's a love story between two teenagers, Brian and Deanie, and she's a beautiful cheerleader, and he's a football star. And they're playing, as it happens in the story, he's playing his last football game, and they are trying to get through high school, their senior year, and they fall in love. And but in the story, what we tackle in there is peer pressure and the struggle with sexual desires. It's about betrayal and jealousy. It's even about teenage pregnancy. It's about insecurities and the fear of the future. And we go through all the emotions that teenagers usually go through at that time in their life. So that's in essence the things we highlight in the story.
Mm-hmm. Who would you say, two-part question here with this next one. First and foremost, who would you say is your intended reader with this book? And secondly, what are some of the main messages you hope that they receive after reading it?
Thank you for asking that. Yeah, I struggled with this. It's almost a story for adults. There's some sexual activity in here, and I believe it's more for adults about teenagers, if you will. And I think it's all of us can relate to those tender years back there as teenagers, but today I think teenagers can find perhaps some understanding and guidance in this story, and I believe parents of those teenagers could also find guidance and understanding.
Yeah, I love that. Curiosity from myself here with this next one, Jerry, but what would you say was a highlight for you in writing the book? Or if not a highlight, maybe something that surprised you that you weren't anticipating before you began?
What's surprising about writing, and maybe not just this novel, all writing, but as you get into the story and into the characters, these characters seem to take on a life of their own. And I was surprised as I was typing what these characters developed into and what they did and how they acted out their emotions. And I mean, that's hard to explain, but there is some kind of a connection between just physically writing something and having these people come to life. That was what was surprising. And I guess that would be the main thing that surprised me. They became very real, and I was pleased with the story unfolded.
I love what you're saying here, Jerry, and as an artist, I can relate, right? When that inspiration hits you, man, it's funny how often I talk to writers, and they say similar things, right? Where you just get the ball moving. That momentum starts to carry you through, and the story develops on its own, essentially, right? You may have developed a foundation, but once it starts to move, that snowflake accumulates into a snowball, and you are just on a downhill trajectory, just moving. I love what you're saying there, and it's absolutely something that is incredibly relatable. People,
yeah, exactly.
Amazon and Barnes & Noble are where you have to go. Playing Hurt is the title you have to pick up, and Gerald L. Nardella is the author you have to thank for bringing it to your table. I'm telling you, this is something to get lost in here. Jerry, I know we've already started to go into this next one, but I think it's so important that it's worth doubling down on and repeating. What would you say, if there's any tips that you can offer? I know we started to go into some of the themes and the messages that the book itself carries. But for any young adults out there going through, maybe they don't go through exactly what your main characters go through, but they're also on their journey of life. And, listen, they're hitting those hills and valleys and just dealing with their own hurt, dealing with their own pain. What are some words of wisdom that you may be able to offer them to kind of steer them through their path?
There's one thing. There was a song, and I can't quote who the author was of the song, but it was a religious song, and it basically said that, you have to walk that lonesome valley. Mm-hmm. You have to walk it by yourself. You might have heard that expression.
Yeah. And
that's really what I felt about the story is that life's a struggle, and you got to do the best you can with what you have, and even though it's painful and you're hurting, you just must carry on.
Right.
That's kind of how I feel about it.
Yeah. I mean, listen, that's great advice. That's great advice. And listen, people, you know what I learned at a very early age, probably not as early as I should have, but as he said, life is just going to continue to go on anyway, right? So I know you may want to give up in the moment, but I promise you're not doing yourself any favors, because life is just going to continue to move and continue to go. But when you start to shift your perception, I remember at a very early age, I realized, and I shifted my perception to understand that even in those quote unquote losses, there were still things to be gained. Right. And really, people, when we talk about it, that's where wisdom comes from. Right. Wisdom comes from the experience that we go through in those moments of adversity. So I know it's not as easy as I'm making it seem, but I know I'm oversimplifying. But for the sake of the interview, and oversimplification is what's necessary. But I shifted my perception. I understood that there are no wins and losses in life. There actually are wins and lessons. And in those moments of adversity, in those moments of quote unquote pain or hurt, if you shift your perception, understand that there are things to be gained and things to be learned from that moment of adversity. Not only do you help yourself get through that challenge, but also you better prepare yourself for the next one coming up. Because I promise you, life is filled with potholes, and you're going to hit some. The best way to deal with it is pull that car over to the side of the road, you change that flat tire, and you just keep moving. Because that's really all you can do.
That's right.
This is fantastic stuff.
And, the only tools we have is what we learn from our environment.
Yeah.
And we have to carry on with what we know and what we can learn.
Absolutely. Another curiosity here, Jerry, you mentioned at the very beginning of the interview that you relate to certain aspects of the encounters that your characters have. So let's having a little fun here, Jerry. Are there any of your characters that you relate to or that you can see yourself in?
Well, this is a fictional account. It really is. But it, obviously there's similarities with the people I've met and known through those years, and it's not about me. However, I did play football, and I did marry my high school sweetheart. But I've known people who struggled with the big part of this book is teenage pregnancy, and I had a friend who had made his girlfriend pregnant, and they were 17 years old, and I watched the struggle and the pain and the hardship that they went through, and those kind of things stuck with me through the years, and I thought it's good writing material. It's the feelings, it's the emotion that I try to display in the book, through these characters.
Absolutely. Last question here, Jerry, as we start to close out of this fantastic interview. As I mentioned to you before, I'm an artist myself. I'm in a different medium, but I do love having my platform, people of distinction here, to utilize in a way of paying it forward whenever the opportunities present themselves. Now, Jerry, you are a bona fide author, man. You've been through the process. You've written your narrative. You've gone through the gauntlet of getting it published. Hopefully, there's much more on the horizon as well. For any new writers out there, someone just embarking upon their own writing journey, Jerry, what are some words of wisdom that you may be able to offer them about what to expect?
I began writing short stories when I was very young, and it was just a way for me to express myself. And I wanted others to read that, and so maybe more understand me. I think that's what it was all about. But as I got older, I read many, many authors, and some of the ones that really stuck out in my mind were John Steinbeck and James Michener, and there's an author called Larry McMurtry, and I read a lot of his novels, and they inspired me to write. And it was the novel that Larry McMurtry wrote. It was called The Last Picture Show. They made a movie out of it. Mm-hmm. And that book sparked the idea for my novel. And I can always relate back to that novel. And so we don't plagiarize, our work, but we get ideas from other authors.
Yeah.
And if anybody wants to write, they have to read. They have to read as much as they can by many different authors. And that's where you gain your knowledge in writing. I truly believe that. And so my advice is to read.
Listen, I love that advice. The way I interpret that is know your craft, right? Whatever it is that you're doing. And this is why that piece of advice is so valuable, because yes, it's made for writers, right? Read other artists, be inspired, and understand, you're gathering inspiration from everything around you. But people, listen, I do this constantly, right? I love to think on a philosophical level and take things and implement it into different boxes, right? And utilize those words. Well, the way I interpret that is perfect your craft. Listen, you may be in a completely different field. Maybe you work in medicine. Well, knowing doctors around you, knowing the other nurses around you, or whatever the particular field is that you're in, perfecting your craft and doing everything that you can to kind of steal pieces of information from all of the other sources around you. All that's going to do is enrich your knowledge and make you even better at what you're doing. This is fantastic stuff, people. I'm telling you, this book has so much to offer from an entertainment standpoint. It's got what you need, but also so many lessons as well, right? As my grandmother would say, Jerry, you are cooking with gas, brother. And we love this, man. This is fantastic stuff. People, Amazon and Barnes & Noble are where you have to go. Playing Hurt, again, is the title you have to pick up. And I'm going to say his name for you one last time just to make sure it's gotten through to you. That's Gerald L. Nardella. Head on over there today, pick up your copies. This is a wonderful book to add to your shelf. An even better gift to add to someone else's. Jerry, this has been a true pleasure. Man, an absolute delight. Thank you once again for being a guest on People of Distinction.
Thank you, Mr. Cole. Enjoyed it.